Go, Carter.
What's going on, Blake? A Sunday afternoon, man. This is normally the time like I get up. I mean, my goodness gracious, man. Good to see all these beautiful people with some really fun Jayden Daniels discourse. I love it, man.
Okay. Well, first off, I'm looking at you right now, and it's like new camera who this. It looks great. Picture looks great. But yeah, Carter, we're talking about Jayden Daniels. I wanted to bring you on. Carter, what is this? Now that we're getting some sourcing and some really reliable people talking about Jayden Daniels possibly coming to LSU, I just said what it tells me. But Carter, what does it tell you?
So the first thing, look, let's bring this into the discussion, right? So you bring in Mike Denbrock, right? Who was his quarterback last year? It was Desmond Ridder,
right?
And I don't know, Blake, if you guys have touched on this yet, but a big part of what Cincinnati did last year was the RPO game, and a lot of it was Desmond Ridder pulling the football and running with it. So, as far as Mike Denbrock is concerned, I do think he would feel a little bit more comfortable as a play caller with having someone who can run his offense, right? And at least if you bring Jayden Daniels in, he gives you that aspect to his game. Now, I understand, we look at Garrett Nussmeier as a mobile dual threat quarterback, but he's not really a runner, right? Athletically, he's not going to kill you with his legs the same way a guy like Jayden Daniels would. Now, once again, we're not saying Jayden Daniels is the next Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson or Tim Tebow. No one is saying that at all. And someone makes a good point about the turnovers and forcing the football into very dangerous situations. I will include, though, that Arizona State as a program was a lot like LSU with a lot of mess going on off the field. And what can happen sometimes, especially if you just start right off the bat, which Jayden Daniels did, some natural regression will just step in, right? As Jayden Daniels was moving along in his career, his coaching actually got worse. So there's that aspect of his game as well. So, once again, no one is saying Jayden Daniels is 10 times better than Miles Brennan, and no one is saying Jayden Daniels is the quarterback of the future compared to Walker Howard or Garrett Nussmeier. The point, though, is if he really wants to come, it gives you such amazing insurance at by far the most vital position in the sport.
I agree with everything, Carter, that you just said. Does it tell you anything about what Brian Kelly's thinking? Meaning, like, is there anything that he looks at this quarterback room and says, hey, guys, look, y'all are good, but you're going to have – I don't know how, Carter, to say it in today's society where if I say something, it's going to be taken out of context. But it feels like that there's a little bit to me that Brian Kelly sits back and watched last year's film and says, hey, man, we're just not ready. And, Carter, he even said that, right? Like, he said it in the press conference that, guys, if we play the game today, we're just not ready to go. Do you think that that's a little bit telling about what he's thinking about the quarterback room?
I think it is, and here's something else that's just really hard to think about as a quarterback, right? It's hard as what to finish a year, right? To start game one and finish that bad boy, especially when you're not winning, right? So Jayden Daniels is battle-tested. You go look at his numbers, right? He performed far worse on the road than he did at home.
That's right.
Right? Now, I will include his best road performance this past year was against Utah, the best team in the Pac-12. So, he had some flashes of excellence. Also, look, his weapons, yes, there was a Brandon Ayuk year mixed in there, and Ayuk is just an amazing wide receiver for the college football level. But really, it's not Jack Besh, it's not Kayshawn, it's not those guys, right? Like that's that's a clear drop off from the skill guys. Now, I will say Arizona State's running back room has always been really, really good, but the receivers is, the number one thing that affects the quarterback, right? And this is the last but certainly not least thing, right? And Blake, you played the offensive line, you know this pretty well. An offensive line that's going to be it's going to be patchwork, right? We're going to have basically a brand new group of guys out there next year. A mobile quarterback helps out with that, right? It just does. There's no other way around it. Not just protection breaking down, it's zone read, it's RPO. Those plays really help out the offensive line, and it makes that defensive line guess a lot more with what you're going to do, right? So there's going to be some games where LSU's offensive line, which is so new, is not going to play that well, and Jayden Daniels would be able to escape and make a few plays if he ends up actually being the guy. Now, this is also very important to include in the story right now as well, is that basically Steve Wilfong, who is a national college football reporter, is the one who really set this small-ish firestorm out about Jayden Daniels because he put in a crystal ball. So we don't know really anything about visits, unless you know something, Blake, that I don't know. We still got to wait and see this thing play out. And Jayden Daniels probably wants to go somewhere where he is going to play, right? So we'll see what happens.
Carter, a little bit too about your Mike Denbrock RPO game. There was a game against Notre Dame, against Brian Kelly, and also against Alabama and Nick Saban, where this is where Jayden Daniels makes the most sense for me, is they run a zone read concept with the offensive line. They read the defensive end. They read Will Anderson. The one bad play of that entire game, Carter, of the absolute dominance that Will Anderson had, because we and you talked about this.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, just like killed it.
Right.
But they did do some good things against him, and I'll mention it here, is they ran an RPO with the offensive line, faked it with the back, but they have as what most people will know it as, is Spider 2 wide banana. Fullback in the flat. They have a tight end going into the corner going into the corner. Carter, that is with a quarterback that knows how to run that system and that is athletic enough to run that system. It is not just dangerous. It could be elite. And right. And that's where I sit back and I wonder, like, you're going to have to be able to move and throw the football in this offense. Now, with that being said alone, that also is where Walker Howard fits best. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I even sit back and say to myself, I don't know, Carter, if there's not a scenario where he's not the number 2 guy if Jayden Daniels comes.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens there, but I just think it's really interesting. There's a lot you can run off of it. Look, if he does come, I'm tiptoeing around where I shouldn't be tiptoeing around. But if he does come, what would your initial thoughts be? Let me ask it like that.
Yeah. So this is obviously a very prevalent question from Charlie Viator. I don't know how to say his last name. How many years does Daniels have left?
2.
So he has 3 years.
Would it be 3?
Yeah, so he has 3 years of starters experience, but he still has 3 years of eligibility left because of the 2020 COVID year. So he started as a true freshman in 2019. 2020, he was also the starter.
So then he'd be a redshirt freshman last year, and then now he'd be a redshirt sophomore, or be a sophomore, right?
Yeah, so
God,
he would have 3 years of eligibility left, and we're talking about a top 50 recruit. And look, I understand that you can win a lot of games with the pocket quarterback. You really can, right? Miles Brennan can get you 9 or 10 wins. But I do want to include this, right? Let's take Georgia, for instance, right? The biggest difference between Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels was Bennett can run, right? He can run. And that was, one of the big deciding factors for Georgia's season, right? Now, let's talk about this guy really quickly. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. This guy in the background right there. Let's talk about Joe really quickly. All right.
Oh, well, see, I saw the Jeremy Hill jersey. He's coming on tomorrow night. So thank you for clarifying. But continue.
Now, so Joe Burrow, his running ability is what won us a lot of games, right? So you take the Clemson game, you take the Alabama game, take all those games, right? the difference was Joe Burrow's running ability. That really was the difference in LSU winning those games, Auburn as well, right? It really changes so much that you're able to do offensively. So, that alone, compared to Miles Brennan's athleticism, is something that's worth mentioning. And that to me would be, the biggest difference between the both of them is that Jayden Daniels, if you're grading it on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as being a runner, he's probably about like a 7. Like he's not Manzielian, he's not definitely Cam, but he put up, I mean, what he had, I think there was more games last year where he had a run of 20 yards or more
than there was
than not, right? So that's obviously a huge difference maker as far as him is concerned. So yeah, I'm a big believer in Jayden Daniels, and I'm kind of talking myself into it. And I know a lot of people see the 10 interceptions. Well, Brian Kelly is good at coaching risk-averse football as well. So keep all that in mind when it comes to his evaluation.
We do have some questions pulling in here, Carter. One from being Bailey, and I think she may be he may be talking about from last year, but hashtag Ask Carter, what do you think is going to be the best or the most interesting or best game played by LSU next year? Well, maybe next year. I don't. Maybe the first one. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But you agree with that, Carter?
Yeah, Florida State obviously is the most fascinating. If you're a college football historian, a lot of us have never seen that iconic Seminole. I had the Golden Domes right there, right? And considering they won their national championship in New Orleans, that's a very big deal for a lot of Florida State fans to go see that game. To me, though, Blake, obviously it's always going to be Alabama, right? Where you have that bye week. But the game that's always given LSU trouble, at least in recent years, is that week 7 and week 8 game, right? Where you play back-to-back Power 5 opponents. You go back to 2019, the Auburn performance was in that week 8 slot. That was LSU's worst offensive performance the entire year. And then 2020, we saw what happened in that week 8 period, right? And then 2021 in particular is where things got really rough for LSU this past year with that Ole Miss game in week 8. So once again, just like last year, you're going to have that week 7, week 8 where you play Florida and Ole Miss back to back. It's going to be brutal. A Lane Kiffin coach team is tough to go up against with tired legs.
And look, Carter, he's got weapons now too.
Right.
It's not that he didn't have weapons last year or the year before, but 2 words, Zach Evans. I mean,
right.
He's got weapons now. Like, this isn't a joke anymore with Lane Kiffin. And look, I think that's I mean, if you're Brian Kelly, you also have to sit back, Carter, and say to yourself, like, look, man, we could get away in the Big Ten with playing some rough and tough. And, we're going up against Wisconsin. We could sit there and line it up and run the football. He can't do that here, Carter. Not anymore.
Right.
And so it just makes it more interesting. I missed the comment, Carter, and I can't find it. People were asking you about tight end. Let me put my own spin on that. Does it tell you a little bit more about what LSU wants to do from offensive philosophy standpoint about not going after a tight end so much than it does? I mean, you have some talent there, but you just don't have a lot of depth.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, just based on, 2 years of what we've seen from Cole Taylor, you have major questions about him going in to next year when it comes to just, the base athleticism you need to play a really difficult position, right? So, obviously we'll see what happens with Jack Mashburn. We'll see what happens with what they view Jack Besh exactly as. Now, I will say this about Jack Besh. His blocking was a lot better than what would think. Now, it wasn't, it wasn't George Kittle, but I mean, it was still, it was still pretty amazing for a guy who's never blocked before. He actually blocked fine. So we'll see. I think just because of depth, they'll still use him as that hybrid tight end, and you'll see, even though it would be 11 personnel, you'll see what essentially is going to be 10 personnel, where Besh is a tight end, and you have 3 of the talented wide receivers out there, who Kayshawn and whoever the other 2 guys would be.
This is some amazing stuff by you. I just gotta let you know, Carter.
That's not amazing. It's not amazing, man. We're just having fun, baby. It's Sunday afternoon, man. I'm normally sipping on Capri Suns and Shirley Temples and eating a few Oreos, man. You got one of the fastest growing platforms. You're killing it. You got Mike Jones, got Jay Hill. Who you got, man? You're just destroying it, man. I love coming on this show. It's one of my favorite shows out there, man. And I will add to this about, the tight end position. It historically has not been one of LSU's stronger positions anyway. Right. And to add on to that, there's just not that many great tight ends. There's not. It's kind of a weird thing, right? Where only one is on the field more often than not. There's just not many of them. It's a weird body type. It's a weird skill set to have to play that position. So I understand a lot of people are panicking about that tight end spot, but not everybody can have Brock Bowers. Not everybody can have Michael Mayer. So you just got to trust Brian Kelly, who's had more great tight ends than essentially anyone, and hope for the best.
I think Bruce Steele makes an interesting point here. So let me bring this up. He says LSU is waiting for Darnell Washington and Hankton connection.
Love it.
Carter, let me tell you something. And I'm an emotional dude. You know that. I know that. And I don't make any bones about it. But let me just say this. If they do get Darnell Washington and they do get Jayden Daniels, okay, Carter out and look, I know the talk will be about the offensive line again. I have my reserves on the offensive line on this, but All-American left tackle, you have some pieces and experience up front. What do you do at center? That's fine. We'll see when we get there. Carter, they're a 9-10 win team, buddy. I really do believe that. If they put those pieces together, I see them being there. I also see that, look, this defense also has pieces. Carter, I'm not trying to talk myself into them playing for an SEC title. I'm not going to do that. But there's something I was going to talk about a little bit later, and I'll even mention it now. I mean, when you look at the NFL Combine and the NFL Draft, and you see the guys that are going to get drafted from last year's team, you would say to yourself, okay, well, that's at minimum an 8-win team. Like right. At minimum an 8-win team. Carter, what do you do now? What do you do now with a really good coaching staff? Now, let me ask you this. Am I somewhat talking myself into something here, or does that have legs?
No. It definitely has legs, man. Come on, man. I mean, we're LSU fans at heart, right? We want to be eternal optimists, right? Mm-hmm. Here's what I'll say. That first game against Florida State is so huge just because of what we've seen the last couple of years as far as how important that first game was. I would say the UCLA game was far more devastating than the Mississippi State game simply because of, last year we just all viewed it as kind of a fluke. Well, me and you were warning everyone going into 2021. Maybe it wasn't, a couple of things that were lingering from that Orgeron team, and we continue to do the same thing in 2021. That first game is just going to be so massive, right? That's a critical game for more so Florida State than even LSU, right? Because
I agree with that too.
Florida State, as chaotic and as nefarious as some of the stuff off the field with LSU has become, at least most LSU fans view Brian Kelly as the best coach right now for LSU. That is not the case for Florida State, right? There are a lot of people that want Deion to have that job right the F now. And, it's a weird thing. That first game is going to be a very strange one because there is so much uncertainty about both of those teams, going into next year. Now, as far as a 9-win team is concerned, yeah, it's doable. That's doable. You're going to need some luck. You're going to need the ball to bounce your way some. But I look, the SEC is going to be really deep next year, right? Arkansas, to me, has a sleeping giant at quarterback in KJ Jefferson. I know they lost Traylon Burks, but KJ was really good. He had 6 games, 70-plus QBR, which is really tough to do. And, Ole Miss is Ole Miss with Lane. And Mississippi State, they bring back Rodgers, and they have a bunch of really skilled guys. I'm really high on Xavier Thomas, the kid, the 3-star wide receiver they got out of Louisiana. So, it's Going to be a brutal SEC, but if the ball bounces your way, you can get the 9 wins easily.
I agree. I just wanted to make sure, Carter, I wasn't talking myself.
No, heavens no. If you have Payshawn on your roster, that's good enough for 1 or 2 wins, right? So, I mean, look, he single-handedly won LSU the Mississippi State game. So, if he's fully healthy and locked in and ready to go, that guy will win you 2 games on his own. You just got to kind of have to figure out how to win 7 more so you can get that magical 9-win number.
See, and here I thought it was just Ed Orgeron cutting up the X's and O's to win Mississippi State. Never mind. All right, our last one. Jared Hill says, talk about the Zion situation. Is there anything that you think about the Zion situation before we get you out of here? Like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I think Zion's fine. Once again, he's a young guy that is going through a lot. Now, his communication with the organization has been very immature, and he could be immature at times, right? You'll see him on the sideline, kind of out of it, right? And he's been training away from the team, and then the CJ McCollum situation, and the JJ Redick situation, and so on and so on. Look, the Pelicans are where they are now because of resilience, because New Orleans is a mother effing basketball city. I'm getting sick and tired. And look, so many people always say this, right? Well, the national media is out to get us. This is one of the few times where you can actually say that as a Pelicans fan, right? The national media, there have been at least 5. I can name 5 specific examples just right off the top of my head of the national media just crapping on the Pelicans when there's no base, in fact, about it at all, as far as the fan base, as far as Gail Benson wanted to be in the city. And look, it's not cool. It's really not cool, right? Especially if you are a big Pelicans basketball fan. So, yeah, obviously Zion needs to handle all of this right. But if you come back and the team is winning and you got an experienced, bona fide leader in CJ McCollum, who has been way better than I thought he was going to be, the Pels are going to be fine. Now, here's the thing, okay? And this happens all the time in society, Blake. We always like to look to our right and say, well, what could have been? What could have been if we would have drafted Ja Morant instead of Zion?
Oh, God.
Stop. Just stop it. I'm tired of people doing this, right? Stop it.
He's just so good.
Is Ja Morant a better player? Yeah, right now he clearly is. He's probably – him or Embiid, the MVP right now. I'd probably give it to Ja Morant. So what? You can't live your life like that. You just can't, right? Like, if I'm a Trailblazer fan, I don't go to sleep every night and say, Sam Bowie, I hate you so much, Sam. Don't do that, because I've seen some of that, right? Blake, where people are like, oh my goodness, we should have drafted the guy from Murray State. No, Zion was the biggest star on the planet. Barack Obama was at his game, just a regular game, the shoe explosion game. I mean, it was what you were supposed to do in that situation, right? No one expected Ja Morant to be like getting on the Damian Lillard, Steph Curry level of dominance that he's been on, right? So don't do that. If you're a Pelican fan, don't do that. Just let Ja be Ja. He's awesome, and just cross your fingers. Zion comes back motivated and ready to go.
We're going to table this conversation for a later time, but I'm a little ticked off with Zion, if I'm being a little honest.
You should be.
But,
just a little bit.
Well, I mean, look, like, I just don't like the whole Fat Carter, like, so now we're on a 4-game winning streak and now you're back in the city. Like that's the only thing for me. Is like, wait a minute, man. When they lost 7 in a row, where were you at? You were in Portland. You weren't talking to David Griffin. That's the only thing that bothers me. Really.
Right.
That's the only thing that bothers me. But nevertheless, you are Carter the Power Bryant. Let's go. Thank you, my friend. Hopefully we will have you on again very soon, because maybe we have a new quarterback. Oopsies. We'll see you, buddy.
See you, bud.